Hello and welcome everyone. Tonight we're going to talk about riding skills progression. My name is Gina Taylor. I am a PATH certified riding, driving, and vaulting instructor. And I thought tonight we will go over some of the ways that you can help your riders meet their goals, some of the ways that you can assess how your volunteers, your leaders, and sidewalkers are impacting your riders and maybe them achieving their goals, and of course answer any questions that you might have. And welcome again to Riding Skills Progression. The first thing we're going to talk about tonight is some typical teaching models, ways that riding is typically taught to riders without disabilities, and then we'll discuss how that relates to riders with disabilities. So when we look at riders without disabilities, we want to know how they gain their riding skills. What is typical? And for those of you who can remember back to when you began riding, how was it that you gained your riding skills? Well, through practice, through challenge within your ability level, and then building on previous skills. So you had opportunities to practice, whether it was that you owned your own horse and you were able to ride a couple times a week, or whether it was that you took regular lessons and that was how you gained most of your practice. In addition, you were often able to practice for an extended period of time. So when you were learning the trot, you spent a majority of your lesson at that gait, learning that skill. Challenge within your ability level. Your instructor would often ask you to do things that were a little bit outside your comfort zone. They were able to help you meet some challenges that you might have had, talk you through some areas where you might not have felt as comfortable. And then they taught things in a way that built on the skills that you already had. Our very, very basic riding skills progression. Teach the halt first. We want our riders to know that they are in control. This goes for both children and adults. We want them to have that feeling of control over the horse. That can also help ease anxiety for both children and adults. So teach the halt. We're going to work from slow speeds to faster speeds. We're going to work on straight lines before we begin turns and circles. And then we work on single tasks before we combine tasks. So if we're working on posting at the trot, we're going to teach the rider posting at the trot. When they've got that mastered, then we're going to start to ask them to post on the trot at a circle. If as we're going along you have any questions, there's a feedback button right above your names on the left-hand side. You can go ahead and let me know if I'm going too fast, too slow, or if you are fine. In the United States, the model of teaching for riding lessons typically start for children between 6 and 8 years of age. That's when children really have the motor control and the ability to follow the multiple step directions, so it fits in well with the fact that most children are only led around for the first lesson or so, and then they are left on their own on a quiet school horse. Adults also begin on a quiet school horse, often with minimal assistance. There might be a little leading or lunging, but as long as they're in an enclosed area, typically adults who are new riders, novice riders, do not have much assistance. In the United States, instructors do not need to have a formal education. Anybody can put out a sign that they're going to teach riding lessons, and that's absolutely fine. There's minimal oversight of teaching riding. It's really buyer beware, consumer beware for riding lessons. You need to check out the riding facility. It's left up to the student. There's typically no formal method for teaching riding skills. It varies by discipline. Dressage will have a level of training, a training scale. Reining has patterns that they're going to work through. Hunter jumpers are going to work on the flat and building skills for working over fences. But each discipline will kind of have a specific method of teaching riding skills for their discipline. And then, of course, in the United States, lawsuits are more of a concern for riding facilities. We all have our equine liability acts for our state, but there's still considerable concern about liability in the event of an accident, whether there would be a concern about negligence. So those are all concerns for pushing riders really to meet goals in the United States. There are some trainer certification programs, and these are all links. Anything that's underlined is a link, so you can click on that link and it will take you to the certification program. So USHJA, that's the Hunter Jumper Association. They have a certification program for instructors. USEA, that's the Eventing Association. And they also have a certification program. ARIA, American Riding Instructors Association. Their certification is pretty broad. It covers a variety of disciplines. They also have a great magazine. And Certified Horsemanship Association, they have a certification as well for both English and Western. And as Susan said, Massachusetts does license riding instructors. As far as I know, they are the only state that licenses riding instructors. So, certainly there's a big variety in the skill levels that we have of instructors. The European model, most riders often begin on a lunge line without reins, so working to develop the seat first. Riders may also begin as vaulters, again to develop that independent seat. Formal instruction systems are often used. So in those cases, there is either a countrywide system that is passed on through a formal education or a discipline specific. Instructors are often required to have formal education or certification, and that varies by country. So Massachusetts has taken the lead in the United States, following a little bit on the European model. There are also certification of riding establishments, similar to PATH's accreditation for premier accredited centers. Instructors will often study a formal methodology for teaching riding, and lawsuits are less of a concern, although not completely avoided there either. So our typical adaptive riding model. Children are often beginning between 4 and 6 years old. Riders begin with a leader and 2 sidewalkers. Lessons are often once per week, often in a group. And adult riders may be taught without or with little input to their goals. So depending on whether they're verbal or nonverbal or the level of their disability may depend on how much they are engaged with their goals, on why they've come to riding and what they want to gain from that. I'm going to go ahead and open up a poll regarding riders and leaders and sidewalkers, if you have a chance to go ahead and answer that. We have another link at the top. If you click on the how can we utilize these models for riders with special needs, there is a video that will link you to. So when we're taking the look at typical riding skills models, oh, the poll disappeared. So clearly most of them have assistance, and a few ride independently is in the lead at 58%. We have a 5% on all of our riders are independent. We also have a 5% at all of them 100% have a leader and 2 sidewalkers. We have a nice bell curve going. Good, we're going to go ahead and close the poll now. That should give everyone an idea of the group. And we're going to go back to our slides. So from that little poll, we saw that the majority of people have most of their riders with a leader and 2 sidewalkers, although some of them are independent. And at the top of the range, all of them have leader and sidewalkers at 5%, and also 5% on all of them are independent. So if we're thinking about incorporating some of the teaching tools from able-bodied riding from the United States and Europe, some of those areas include focusing on the rider's goals, and there's a variety of different ways we can engage riders to determine what their goals are. And this may not be the same as determining what the family's goals are, particularly for children or for people who are nonverbal. If you ask their parents or caregivers or group home what they want to get out of it, that may not be the same as what the student who's actually on the horse wants to get out of it. So for riders who are nonverbal, giving them choices, whether those are picture icons or just offering up 2 hands with each hand representing a choice, are ways to help them tell you what it is that they enjoy doing. If you see that they are choosing trot more than circle, then you can begin to infer that they are enjoying trotting and they might want to build some skills in that area. For the lower functioning riders who, again, are nonverbal, you may not necessarily decide to sit down and say, all right, Johnny, I want to know what your goals are for riding. That might be too difficult for them to understand, but there are other ways that you can engage them in some goal setting for their riding skills. And like I said, giving them choices, even if it's between 2 pictures of what they would like to do, circle or jump. And as you see a trend over time of which types of skills they tend to pick, you can incorporate those into their goals. For other riders who are adults, it's certainly appropriate to sit down with them at the beginning of a session, ask them what their goals are, ask them how hard they want to work for those, how often are they able to come ride with you, how hard do they want to be pushed, what teaching style they want you to engage them with, and that'll give you an idea of whether those goals are realistic or not. And that can be the same for some children. You can certainly engage them in asking them what they want to do with their riding, and they'll let you know, and then you can help talk to them about what they need to do first before they get to do what it is that's their goal. We'll use riding skills progression, again, to build upon those previous skills. And we'll seek certifications that teach an instructional methodology. So we're going to put up a poll regarding PATH certification. If you'll go ahead and vote for your PATH certification, are you a PATH certified instructor? All right, it looks like the majority of people are certified at the registered level. We have 3 people certified at the advanced level, 1 person who's an instructor in training, and 4 people who are not certified through PATH. Are you certified through another organization? You can type it into your chat on the bottom of your screen. Let us know if you're not certified through PATH, if you're certified through another organization, or just go ahead and let us know if you're not certified at all and you're just gaining some more skills here tonight. We'll go back to our slides. We'll close that one. All right, we have someone, Judy here from Whitehorse. She's certified through CHA. I really like CHA's program because you need to go through their able-bodied certification first, and then you can go ahead and get their certification for their riders with disabilities. I like that model. So some general considerations we'll talk about now on riding skills progression. Horse matching, knowing your horse's level of training. Is this a school horse that has done lessons for a long time? It's a schooly kind of push button. Is this a show horse that is a little bit more sensitive but can do walk, trot, canter? Is this a horse that is really, really quiet and that's why you've accepted him into your program, but really doesn't have a high level of training, is really just a walk, trot horse? When an able-bodied trainer is riding him, he's not real straight, hard to get him to bend left and right. Those types of things will obviously impact your rider's progression. If you need the really, really quiet, maybe weight carrier horse, but your rider's goal is to walk, trot, canter, that might not be a good match for your rider's goals. Know your horse's skills. We want to know, again, horse, walk, trot, canter, did they have lateral aids? What other skills do they have? Can they trailer out to go to a horse show? Can they go out on a trail ride? Those type of skills, again, will help match your rider's goals. If your rider's goal is to jump a small course, and that might just be ground poles, your horse has to have that skill. Will the horse respond to accidental cues? If you're teaching a number of riders that have physical disabilities, a horse that would respond to accidental cues might not be a good match and might delay them in reaching their goals. On the other hand, a horse that is slow to respond to cues might not be a good match for a person with a cognitive disability who's really learning cause and effect. So someone who needs to learn cause and effect needs a horse maybe that's going to respond a little bit quicker. If there's a significant delay there, they're not going to get the cause and effect piece because the horse was a little bit slow to respond to their cues. Is the horse voice command trained? It's very nice if you can work with your horses on the lunge to respond to voice commands. And if that's the case, especially as you get into trot and canter, that can be very helpful. And it can also help to avoid an accident if you see someone's beginning to lose their balance. And you can, from the center of the arena, say, and walk. And the horse will do a nice transition. That works really well. How does the horse fit the rider? There's a link to a nice little article about horse and rider fit. And the effect of the match on the horse is a link to an article regarding stress in the horse. So those two things are important. The fit is important both physically. So how does the horse physically fit the rider? Is the horse really wide and you have someone who has tight legs, or do you have a very small child who's on a 16-hand horse? Both of those will impact the ability for the rider to reach their goals. And then again, the effect of the match on the horse. Is this a great match for the rider to reach their goals, but it really stresses the horse out? That's not going to be such a good match overall over time if you want to keep the horse in your program. Our lesson type, we have private versus group lessons. And again, there's some links on this page. Private lessons allow the instructor to focus on the individual rider's goals. So you can take the whole time to focus right on the rider, what they want, how they're progressing. You can break it down into small steps. But for some riders, that is too much. It's too intense. They need a chance to receive instruction and then go practice. And then group lessons, right? We have the social aspect. It's also good for riders who are visual learners and who can really learn from seeing another rider do it. It can also be good for motivation. So if someone is right about ready to progress to the next level of skill, if you put them in with a group of riders who are just above their skill level, that can often be really good to push them along to the next level. Kathy just asked a question, how often do we progress our students to the canter? And I actually have a poll set up for that. Here we go. If you guys will vote, how many of the riders you teach canter? think we're seeing a pretty strong weighting on this one. We're at 88%. 94% of us have 0 to 24% of our students cantering. We have one person who has about 50% of their students cantering. So clearly it seems like, Kathy, you are not in the minority there. Most of the people also have their students walk and trot, but not so many canter. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through how to progress students to the canter, whether they are ready for that, or is there something about their disability that might not allow them to canter in a traditional lesson, and might there be some other alternatives that maybe would help them get to that skill level. Tack adaptations. So this is another consideration for helping people reach their goals. We want to make sure that they follow the Path Adaptive Tack guidelines. Not sure how many of you know that is in the standards manual, so here is a link. Again, the part that is underlined, if you click on it, it will take you to the Path Adaptive Tack guidelines. So adaptive tack can be very helpful. That can be something simple as a cage stirrup, a toe stopper. Those types of stirrups can be very helpful for a rider who tends to either push their foot too far into the stirrup or lose their stirrups. That might be an adaptation to help them remain stable so that way they can do more work at the trot. Does the tack adaptation attempt to compensate for a contraindication? If that's the case, then the adaptive tack wouldn't be appropriate. And how could this tack, this piece of equipment, help the student progress? So maybe you've made, can we view this link while you are talking? Yes, you should be able to view the link. It will go ahead and open another window in your browser, and then you'll be able to view that beside. And then how does this help your student progress? So if your student is always having trouble holding their reins in the right spot, a lot of us use rainbow reins, and that's one level of adapted tack, but we might also decide to then go ahead and put loops on those reins so that way they hold the loops and they spend less time losing their reins, they have better control, and they can then go ahead and progress with their rein skills. So here's the big important questions. Leaders and sidewalkers, right? We took our poll a little bit earlier about how many of us use leaders and sidewalkers, and definitely there's a majority leaning towards using leaders and sidewalkers. So we want to take a little bit of time and stop to consider, why is the volunteer necessary? What skill is the rider unable to do and requires assistance for? And does the assistance make the rider safer? So when you start thinking about your riders, kind of pick one out in your head and then try to answer these questions. So why is the volunteer necessary for that particular student? Is it because they have poor safety awareness and they're likely to run into another horse while they're in a group lesson? Is it that they don't follow directions well and they're impulsive and you really want someone there to supervise them? So what skill is the rider unable to do and that they require assistance for? So if the rider has difficulty with safety awareness and they're likely to run into another horse, if they were in a private lesson, would they not need the volunteer? Is that an option? Or if you structured your lesson a little bit differently, would you be able to remove that volunteer for a part of the lesson? That might be an option. And then does the assistance make the rider safer? So certainly we don't want anyone running into another horse and rider in a group lesson. That definitely would not be safe. But again, we might have some other options for making that rider safe, either through teaching proper spacing and distance, or the way we structure our lesson. Those are all options that might decrease the need for the leader or sidewalker. So the leader's function is to help control the horse. The leader might also be helping the horse understand the rider's rein aids or leg aids. So if the rider is making a valid attempt, but maybe they are a little confusing to the horse because their hands aren't very stable while they're trying to squeeze with their legs, the leader might step in and help the horse understand. And then the leader might be active, passive, supportive, or acting as a spotter. So if they're active, they are leading and directing the horse. This would be when the riders are doing warm-up exercises at the beginning of the lesson. Passive, they have the lead rope attached, but they aren't providing any directive unless there's a safety concern. Supportive, they might be giving a little bit of direction, like getting that horse to walk when the person is giving a confusing aid. Or the horse might be off lead and the volunteer might be acting as a spotter for the horse. And as your riders gain some skills, you might be working through that level of assistance and getting riders into that spotter category where someone is still keeping an eye on them, particularly if you're teaching a group lesson. And that way you have someone there to keep an eye on them again for those safety concerns, but without the leader being on lead, they have to be active. The rider has to be active. The maximum ratio for a group at my facility is 1 instructor to 5 students, and that would be 5 students with basic level skills. So those are students that have basic knowledge for stopping, walking, and trotting. If they are more beginner students, then the ratio is a little bit lower, 1 to 3 or 1 to 4, depending on the group. Our sidewalkers, the function is the safety of the rider and communicating with the rider. They might provide guarding for riders with physical disabilities or provide support for riders with cognitive disabilities. So if a rider has a physical disability that makes them not very coordinated, that sidewalker might be there as a just in case. But certainly there are many riders, particularly children, who learn to use the sidewalkers who are there just in case and may work a little bit less hard for getting to the next skill level, or may spend some of their time chatting, which is definitely nice in the warm-up and cool down. But if we are working on teaching a skill, that can definitely impact our skills progression. And then for riders with cognitive disabilities, our sidewalker might be reinforcing the instructor's directions. But at the same time, that could also mean that the sidewalker is talking to the rider with the cognitive disability when they really need to process and they miss some of the riding instructors' teaching and therefore, again, are slower to progress. So the effects. Leaders and sidewalkers can reduce the effectiveness in the instructor's teaching, and I'm sure many of you have had the experience where you are teaching and you find that one of your volunteers are teaching. Not only can that be confusing for the student, but again, it can also reduce the effectiveness of your teaching. If you have gone through a certification program, you've learned certain techniques to communicate with your rider, to break down those skills. And if you have a leader or sidewalker, teaching your student something that might work for them and their horse, but it may not work for your particular rider. An example of this is I was teaching a rider who was wearing AFO ankle braces, and my volunteer was coaching them on getting their heels down. So instead of them paying attention to their steering and leg aids, they were paying attention to the volunteer who was trying to get them to do something they were physically unable to do. The leaders and sidewalkers may impact the rider's sense of independence, especially with adults. So if you are teaching adult riders, you want to keep this in mind. Most adult riders, if you're talking about those with multiple sclerosis or a developmental delay, they are very, very aware of what the leaders or sidewalkers are doing. And as much as your leader and sidewalker may try not to interfere, many of those adults will feel like the horse is paying more attention to the leader or the sidewalker is getting in their way. So it's definitely about talking with your adult riders about those things. And then leaders and sidewalkers often provide too much assistance and limiting the progress of the rider. So they want to be really helpful. They've come to your organization to volunteer to be helpful, but sometimes they don't know when to be helpful and when to let the rider struggle a little bit with the skill. So the actual skills we're going to talk about now, the halt, right? We talked about this a little bit in the introduction. We begin with teaching the halt because those who cannot stop their horse cannot control their horse. Riders often feel safer when they know that they can stop their horse. And you can use a variety of strategies to teach halt, including your rein aids and voice commands. So again, the horse that is voice command trained can make that a little bit easier for your student. Our transitions to walk. Often we start with just asking our rider to say walk on, which can be helpful. However, if we teach that transition to walk correctly at the beginning, using our voice, using our seat, and using our legs, the other transitions will often be easier later. So I definitely urge you all to consider that, even if it has to be helped a little bit from your volunteer sidewalkers to get those leg aids, even so they get the concept of using a leg aid for the walk-on transition. We want riders to, again, use as many aids as they can to the best of their ability. Our basic riding position, we want to correct that at the halt. So when you look at your student get on for the first time, we want that shoulder, hip, heel alignment. If we're not seeing that, we might need to do something with our tack. We might need to use a wedge. We might need to use a different saddle. Some saddles, like a dressage saddle with a straighter flap, or a jumping saddle with a more rounded flap, or a Western saddle with a deeper seat where that person will be aligned. Then we want to make those corrections at the walk. We want that person to be able to maintain that. So if we've made an addition to our tack, we've put a wedge under the person, we want them to be sitting in alignment. Let's see how that goes at the walk. And then we're going to teach that basic position again when the rider starts to learn school figures. Often we'll see that riders can keep that position pretty well when they're going straight, whether it's walk, trot, canter. But then when we start to add school figures such as circles, figure eights, serpentines, we often see them start to lean, whether it be forward and back or off to the side. So we want to go back to teaching that basic position of keeping our shoulders, hips, and heels in alignment. Our rein aids, right? Our most basic one is to halt. So we're introducing that right from the beginning. And most riders, again, you can use a variety of adapted reins. So that way they have some way to communicate with their horse through the reins. It could be rainbow reins. It could be loop reins. There are ladder reins. We have a set of reins with a PVC, basically bar at the end of them, where the student holds on. Tennis ball reins, all of those are adapted reins, but allowing the rider to communicate with the horse. Then we're going to teach left and right turns so we can begin to change direction. Then we introduce school figures, and then we're going to do a refined rein use for bending the horse, half halts, and lateral movement. So we have a whole progression here of rein aids. School figures, you want to think about how children often learn their shapes. So we can teach our school figures similar to that. We're having a circle, and you can use a variety of different cues for teaching these. So you could cut out circles and put them around the arena, or you could then take two of those circles you cut out around the arena and put them together to make a figure eight. Then you could cut that circle in half for a half circle, and then a half circle in reverse for them to change direction, and the serpentine. Visual aids are often good for this. You can use flour or athletic lime in your arena to draw it out. Many of us have done the dig the boot in the ground to at least make a line in the footing so that the riders can follow it. And you can also do some songs to talk about different types of shapes to teach those school figures. Here's our walk, trot, canter piece. right? We're teaching the skill at the walk, but then we want to start introducing some of the skills at the trot. Oftentimes we wait a long time before we start introducing the trot, and then even longer, or we may never get to introducing the canter. So if the rider has an independent seat, good safety awareness, and basic steering, they don't have to have really good steering. If you have a pretty good school horse, they can learn to canter at that point. And again, really most of the time the difficulty with the canter is the transition into and out of the canter. So a horse that is voice command trained or well trained is really the key to teaching the canter. It's often not the student, but like the trot, they have to get the feel of it. So the horse has to be smooth going into the canter, and then of course cantering, the transition from canter back to trot. If that is rough, and that's enough to unseat the rider. Ideally, the kind of good school horse that will stay on the rail and canter around even if someone is holding on. Those are the best horses to teach the canter on. But if you don't necessarily have one of those, you can teach riders to canter in vaulting if they decide that they're going to take vaulting lessons, or just on a well-trained lunge line horse. So if you can get your horse to canter well on the lunge, you might decide to have a person who's ready to progress to canter come independently or privately for a few lessons. It might be as few as 2 or 3, and put them on the lunge line. Or if there's a way you can break your lesson up, have part of your group do an activity, a game, or another riding skill while you have someone on the lunge for 5 or 10 minutes, just so they can hold on and get that feeling of canter, know what to anticipate, because it's so different from the other gaits, and it feels very different until they know what to expect. They might not know how to prepare their body. So often those are the best ways for getting those students from trot to canter. You know that they're doing pretty well at the trot. Again, they're able to do some of those basic safety skills, and you really just need to take that time and decide which is the right horse. Do you have a canter horse? And then is it better for them to learn on the lunge line for the first time? And if not, can they come maybe for a private lesson to work on that? Our adaptations, we'll get into those specifically for progression. So here are some of our typical physical impairments that we might need to make an adaptation for so our riders can progress. Our adaptations would be go ahead and use their cognitive strengths, right? If they have some good cognition, we can talk to them about how they should use their body, give them very specific details. We're going to need to allow increased practice time. We can use task analysis to teach part of the skill, so we're going to break it down into smaller pieces, see what parts they can master, and then work on the parts that are more difficult. Provide off-horse practice. Often one of the things that can be difficult as riders progress with their rein aids is that shortening and lengthening the reins. So if you get donated equipment to your program, give them a set of reins to take home, buckle them to a chair, and have them sit while they're watching TV in the evening or before they do homework, and have them practice shortening and lengthening. You can put a piece of colored electrical tape and say, I want you to lengthen up to red, and then go back to green. So that way when we're in our lesson, you're going to be a little bit more coordinated to do that. So we're going to increase our speed or turns, but not both, as we start to teach our students, particularly those with physical disabilities. Those are the 2 areas where they're going to have more difficulties. Either they can do trot or they can do canter, but they can't do it on a circle, or they can do a circle, but they can't do it at the speed. And then teach more theory to them, or more precision. So asking them to bend on a circle, sometimes more so than a less demanding riding skill. So you can sometimes substitute in having them work a little bit harder at a slower speed, with making them be a little bit more precise if they can't handle the physical ability of working at either a higher speed or a harder task. Some of our cognitive impairments that might impact our riders, and some of the adaptations. Have them repeat the task. They can repeat it back to you, go do it, come back, ask them what they did, repeat it again. We want to minimize verbal direction sometimes. It can be hard for them to process the language that we use to tell them what to do. This is sometimes where a group riding lesson can really come in handy. Watch Johnny trot down the long side. All right, Sarah, now you're going to go trot down the long side. They're going to see it and do it, see it and do it. Watch Johnny post. All right, Sarah, you try to do it, up and down. Use easier concepts. Again, if cognition is the problem, you could use colors, red turn on the right side and yellow turn on the left side, rather than right and left. If they don't know their right and left, they may know their colors. So you could use the colors that they know to tell them which turns to make. Use task analysis again, breaking down skills. What part of the riding skill are they having trouble with? Is it that they don't understand the concept of distance, so they don't realize that they're getting too close to another horse? So if you break that down, you might be able to find a way to teach a smaller part of that so they can be more successful. And then reviewing the developmental concepts for letters, colors, directional terms such as up, down, back, and forth, and cause and effect. Those are the way to break things down again into the easier concepts such as colors as opposed to left and right. We'll take some time as a summary. Remember, safety comes first. So when we're talking about our volunteers and decreasing sidewalker assistance, decreasing leader assistance, we want to remember that safety comes first. But also remember that there is risk involved with riding lessons. You certainly want your parents and your participants to understand that there is a risk involved in riding, and to reach your goals, sometimes you have to take small calculated risks. So safety comes first, but we're going to push people to help them meet their goals. We're going to use a task analysis to help the riders master parts of a complete skill. So if the complete skill is posting trot on a circle, we're going to break that down into the circle and the posting trot. We're going to break the circle down into the leg aid, the rein aid, the visual dimensions of the circle, staying on a circle, beginning a circle, ending a circle. Those are all parts of the task of making a circle. And then the task analysis for the parts of posting are the rhythm, the timing, maintaining your balance, keeping the horse in the trot gait, and then steering and controlling the speed of the horse. So if the rider is having difficulty with posting the trot on a circle, you can then go ahead and say, okay, well, they can do the circle. They know how to open the circle and end the circle. They're able to maintain their steering aids, maintain the bend. So it's not the circle that's the problem. All right, when we look at it, trot, they can get their horse into the trot. They can post in rhythm, but maybe they're having trouble on the circle keeping the horse in the gait. So the horse is going too slow or too fast. So breaking that down, then taking them back to the straight sides of the arena and having them really work on that part of the task. Slowing the horse down, speeding the horse up in the trot gait, and then have them come back to trotting, posting trot on the circle. Allow the riders to help set their goals. And again, there's a variety of strategies. You can give them a piece of paper with a checkoff list. These are the goals I'd like to learn. You can show them picture icons and have them point to the activity or the goal that they want to do and write it up that way. You can have them fill out a handout that they take home and actually write out just kind of a blank. What are your goals for the next 8 weeks? What types of things do you want to master? And then it's important, especially with adults, to go back to them and tell them what's realistic. So if you have a rider who's just beginning to walk and trot, and you send them home with a goal sheet and they come back and say, you know, I want to be cantering in the next 8 weeks, then you need to be, as the instructor, be able to sit down with them and say, I understand that your goal is to canter in the next 8 weeks. However, these are the skills that you need beforehand. And if you go back to the riding skill progression, we talk about, you know, straight lines first, then your school figures, going through your rein aids, and be able to point out, right now with your rein aids, you know, you really don't have the skill to control the horse at the canter. We really need to work on that. And here's the activities that we're going to do for part of the next 8 weeks. so that way you can be more successful, but I think a realistic timeline for your goal of cantering is 6 months or a year or 4 riding sessions at your facility. Give them an idea. If you don't have a horse, that's going to help them meet that goal. You don't have that walk, trot, canter horse. You don't have a horse that canters well on the lunge. You may also need to tell them that. Here's some resources. From one of the PATH conferences, there was a really good handout from some instructors called Tying Your Lessons Together. It gave some additional examples. Dreamcatchers has a skills progression chart. This is another way for you to see some of the skills and how they were broken down. We saw Lori here, don't forget to make it fun on the way to success. And that's very true. There's definitely a variety of ways to make it fun. And if you're working towards something that's meaningful to you, often that is more fun than doing what your instructor tells you to do because you have to. But there's a variety of different ways to make our lessons fun as you're working on achieving those goals, whether it's just getting out of the arena and doing a trail ride where they're going to work on a particular skill that they're working on, or including a game type of activity that ties in back to the skill that they're learning. CHA, the Composite Horsemanship Manual, has all of their levels of riding in it. It's actually a pretty nice handout, breaks down different riding skills. TRAV, the Therapeutic Riding Association of Virginia, has a Rider Achievement Certificate Program, and you can actually download those from their website and send those in to get certificates for your students. The 4-H Riding Skills Testing Sheets, again, those are rider skill levels that can give you some ideas on breaking skills down, finding out where your students have some success and where your students have areas that you need to spend a little bit more time on. The 4-H riding skills, mounted and unmounted, again, that gets a little bit more into the horsemanship piece, which can be a big motivator for some of our students. So if you look at the riding skills, it's nice that there is a mounted piece and an unmounted piece that you can incorporate into your lessons. And then Pony Club D level. So if you're looking again towards the lower level of riding skills, Pony Club D level has a nice set of riding skills there. I want to leave some time to answer some questions that people will probably have as we went through this. I also have one more poll to go through here, and we'll open this up. Oh, I think everyone must have fell asleep. So it seems like the majority of everyone who's still with us rides at least once per week. So the next time that you go out and ride, I want you to think about your skills and think about your rider skills and see if you can find, particularly as you're working through some of the levels that your riders cannot do, what is it that you are able to do different than what they're able to do? Is it a physical task that they really have trouble coordinating their body, or they have trouble having an independent seat so they get bounced around at the trot? What is it that you're doing with your body that might be different than what your students are doing with their body? Or is it cognition? Is it something that you understand that they don't seem to get the concept of? I think Mary Wanless is a great instructor for riders with physical disabilities. If you've read any of her books, one of them is called The Natural Rider, and there are several other ones. But Mary Wanless, if you are teaching riders with physical disabilities, I definitely urge you to get, you can check them out at the library or go to a Borders or Barnes and Nobles and maybe read them there or at least look through them. The reason why I say this is because they are very, very specific regarding physical instruction. Do this with your body, do that with your body. I learn very well that way, but I think riders with physical disabilities who have good cognition, you can use that to their strengths. Help them by telling them what specifically to do with their body. For riders with cognitive disabilities, so those that are on the autism spectrum, those with developmental delays, I certainly think Sally Swift sometimes can be a great kind of model of teaching because some of the imagery is a way that would click for the student that wouldn't when you teach in a typical manner. So those are two recommendations, Mary Wanless for those with physical disabilities and Sally Swift for those with cognitive disabilities. I think those two methods are really great. If anyone has any questions, if you want to go ahead, we have about 9-10 minutes left. And Lori just responded here with her idea for fun, using a coffee can and letting them pick out a skill that they're going to then go ahead and demonstrate. And those are a really great way to do it because you can tailor it towards that class. So if you know you have a class that's really just working at the walk, you make all your skills that they're going to choose from at the walk, but they really don't know what skill they're going to get. So it keeps it a little bit more fun and exciting. And again, if you have any questions, go ahead, type them down in the chat there, and we'll go ahead and answer them. Is there anything else you would like me to cover this evening? All right, well, I thank everyone for attending tonight. I hope you learned a little bit about rider skills progression. We talked about some general characteristics. We talked about some adaptations that you can use. We went through some of the basic riding skills and how you would build upon them. And there's certainly a number of resources here in this presentation that you can click on, some videos from different places. And we'll talk a little bit here. Marcy just asked, please share with us how you teach posting trot. So a variety of different ways that I teach the posting trot depending on what the student's ability level is. Sometimes I will teach them from a forward or jumping position. So if they have that position mastered because they just need to stand up, I'll have them get up into that position. And then as they're going, we'll just tell them to sit. So they've already got the up, which is generally the harder part, and then go ahead and sit down is a little bit easier for them. And then if that's not real effective, I might have them practice beforehand, either on the ground in kind of a squat position and do, sit, stand, or up and down as we typically do. Up, down, up, down. If that doesn't work, sometimes clapping is a good way to do it. So if you are clapping in rhythm with the horse, maybe the up down is a little bit too difficult for them to process in the moment. Generally, it's the people who can't get up, so you start trotting, you've explained to them, they can do it on the ground, they can do it at the halt, stand up and sit down, they can do it at the walk, maybe even stand up and sit down, but really when you get to the trot, they just can't do it. Those are the people that I typically teach from the forward position. So they're up in the forward position, and then I have them go down because that's easier. They're going with gravity. It's not hard. And then sometimes putting them on a horse that has a little bit more bounce, a little bit more assist than one of our flatter moving, more Western moving horses. And Susan shared with us, if you have them on their knees on the ground, have them sit on their heels, and then move their hips up and forward. That's another nice way to teach them on the ground and get them to practice it and then transfer it over to the horse. Are there any other, Leslie, did you have a question about some of the advanced skills? What population are you teaching, if you want to share a little bit? certainly as you're teaching riders, depending on the group that you have, you know, again, what are their goals? And those advanced skills, whether that's trot and canter work, whether that's bending, half halts, lateral work, there are definitely ways to break that down for students, whether they're students on the autism population. Okay, yep, there we go. So students on the autism spectrum. So for students on the autism spectrum, if you're trying to get them to do some advanced skills, if they are still kind of in the walk trot, supported with a leader or supported with sidewalkers, one of the ways to push them a little bit is, again, seeing if you can take away some of that support, seeing what how they learn the best. If it tends to be visual, then maybe if you have another staff person or an able-bodied volunteer, maybe instead of having your volunteer sidewalk with the person, could they come and ride to demonstrate the skill and then have your student do it after? And then often with this population, sometimes hand over hand can be very effective, or hand over foot. So if we're working on bending, we might just use the cue to the student, bend, and then we'll have the volunteer who's on the side that the horse is bending do the hand over hand for both the leg aid and the rein aid. So we want to kind of cue that into the student with autism, that when I say bend, I want you to use your rein like this and then your leg on the horse's side. So that's one of those ways. And if you're talking more about canter, whether it's someone on the autism spectrum or not, particularly those who are on the autism spectrum, if you can get a chance to do, put them on the lunge line so they get to experience it, it can be motivating, and then you can work back to breaking down the skills for them. And Kelly asks, tips for teaching the canter. Kelly, is it that they're having difficulty with the canter depart? Sometimes, again, that can be the difficulty, and that's really a horse skill and a horse level of training. So if you know that your horse is well trained, you might just have them go ahead and work on working on the aid, so that if the horse's leg aid is outside leg back, again, we might practice that from the ground. I might have a volunteer teach them at the halt, or come in and do hand over hand or hand over leg and teach them at the halt what that exact move is. And then while they're out working, I'd say, okay, we're going to do the leg aid now and canter. And again, if your horse will respond to the voice cue, or even your body language as the instructor, pairing those things together. Great, and we have some good ideas going on in chat for everyone about some of the more advanced skills, and attending some additional certifications or some additional workshops. Okay, yes, and the rider's anticipation. So the rider, is that anxiety, or that they're anticipating the canter and making the horse excited? Those can both be concerns with teaching the canter. Often, again, because the canter has a different feel, it has a different rhythm, because the student doesn't know what to expect. They can become tense, they can become nervous, they tip forward, their hands come kind of into their stomach, they get in that whole kind of crouch position, they've lost their alignment, they've lost all those pieces that you were working so hard for. So teaching them lean back as they ask for that canter aid. Again, if you can't do it on the lunge line, where you can have them hold on, or if they can hold on with one hand, the inside hand, and just steer with the outside hand, and use them, allow them to hold on with the inside hand and push their upper body back a little bit with that inside hand as they ask for the canter, that can be helpful. I hope that answers your question a little bit more regarding the anticipation piece. And again, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for Windrush, and thank you for attending. If you have any additional questions, certainly you can review the PowerPoint or contact me. Ask any questions. I'd be happy to help you. Thank you for coming tonight. Great, thanks everybody.